First is I can do that. The first is the just the roll call of who's here, and I will just read the names of the people that I see here. In case I'm missing anybody, please jump in at the end and make sure that we have everybody here. So we have Molly Cook, Michelle Velez, Sarah Blaylock, Amy Julian, Greg Kissinger, Brittany Boston, Dan Kunert, Jasmine Williams, LaDonna Henson, Lee Reese, Mike Massey, Mitch Dickey, and Lori Kittner. Did I miss anybody? Great, thank you. We do have a new participant today who's joining the committee for the first time. That's Lee Reese. Lee is from the Mid-America Workforce Investment Board that is sort of southern western Illinois, sort of St. Clair County, Clinton, Washington, Randolph, that area. Lee, you want to just introduce yourself for a second? Tell a little bit about your group.
Yeah, good day, everyone. I'm Lee Reese. I'm the Director of Workforce Development, St. Clair, Clinton, Monroe, Randolph, and Washington counties in southwestern Illinois. I oversee 6 offices, 20 employees. We administer WIOA funding as well as apprenticeship expansion grant. A lot of our targeted, we are targeted populations. So a lot of our clients, almost all of our clients are barrier populations. So we work hard to work with businesses to use diversity and inclusion principles as well as talent pipeline management strategies.
Great. Well, thanks for joining the group, Lee. It's one of the things we work really hard to do is to get representation from around the state. It's easy to get sort of heavily weighted to sort of the heavy part up in Northern Illinois. So appreciate you being part of this and keeping kind of us aware of the differences and requirements across the state. Second, when we got together last time, we introduced something new to our meetings, which I think will be really interesting to hear. And that's sort of for all of us to remember that ultimately, as much as we work here on policy and process, that this is all about trying to find jobs for people who have barriers to employment. And so each month we're going to share a success story. So people signed up last month for the next few months, and so Michelle was nice enough to step up for this month and share a little bit about some of the success stories of people that she and DRS are working with. Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. Let me see here if I could go into screen share. Am I in there? Sorry, David. I think I accidentally minimized here. 1 second. Advanced. Do I go into advanced sharing options?
So you should be able to click share screen and then just basic, and you should be able to see your file, or you could put your file in the chat and I can share it either way.
Got it. Sorry.
No worries. Take your time. I've done this a million times.
Share and Zoom too much. Okay, here we go. Okay, can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Michelle Velez. I'm with the Division of Rehabilitation Services in the Workforce Development Unit, and my title is Business Employment Consultant. So I am not a DRS counselor. I wanted to share 2 success stories from my unit. One is a customer I worked with. Her name is Kim. I'm not giving full names, so Kim D. Kim is from Elmhurst, Illinois. She had a bachelor's degree from Marquette University. Kim was blind. She had leukemia, was diagnosed with leukemia in 2010. And in 2011, after a bone marrow transplant, she's been in remission. We were successfully able to place Kim in employment with the Chicago Lighthouse, and she got a position as a medical scheduler in the University of Illinois Hospital and Healthcare Call Center. She was hired in March, on March 1st, 2021. I put the age just so you guys could see that we help individuals of any age that is seeking employment. So she was 56 years old. Upon hire, she was working on site, using public transportation to get to the city, getting rides from family. And now since COVID, she's been working remote from home. Her DRS case was successfully closed with no issues in June 2021. Her past employment history had included employment with Discover Card and Quaker Oats as an application programmer, but she was unemployed for many years, taking time off to raise her children. just a little bit I was going to share. I worked with Kim for just a couple of months before we did a direct placement into employment with the Chicago Lighthouse. It was a real struggle. She was aware of the Chicago Lighthouse, but because they have a lot of people that are blind working there, she pretty much wanted to try to get employment somewhere else. Plus, because she lives in the suburbs, public transportation wasn't as easily accessible for her to get directly to the location for the Chicago Lighthouse in the city. So, you know, we were applying for positions with a lot of employers, but as many of you know, not everybody has accessibility with JAWS, which was a program she needs to use. So when we assisted her with this direct placement, she was really excited about this opportunity. And DRS was able to actually, because she had many years of time off raising her children, we were able to pay for her to get some computer training so she could work on improving her skills. Let me just scroll down here, sorry. So I did an employer check-in because I like to make sure if I'm sharing a success story, this person is still employed. So when I did the employer check-in last week on 2/16, I received an email back. They said, hi, Michelle, Kim is still employed and is doing great, no issues. She's a great employee and is helpful with our blind and visually impaired employees. She was on site Tuesday assisting with Epic. Epic Systems is one of the largest healthcare information technology used by large US hospitals and healthcare systems. She works close with Epic when we need her to test things out for the JAWS users, legally blind and visually impaired. She demonstrates to see if Epic is accessible or what we need to make it accessible. So that was one story. And I have a colleague, I apologize, I'm gonna talk fast because I know David just wanted one, but I have a colleague that really wanted me to share his story. His customer was Frank D from Justice, Illinois. Frank was on the autism spectrum disorder. He had a welding certification from Moraine Valley Community College. We were able to assist him with a direct placement into an OJT program with Chicago Metal Fabricators as a welder and metal fabricator. He was hired December 6, 2021. He is 23 years old. Past employment history included working at Jewel and Sam's Club part-time. He really struggled after getting his welding certification to find a full-time position in welding. In the beginning, Frank was assigned to grinding, which is a repetitive, albeit important process in metal fabrication. It requires long durations of bending and reaching. After Frank's first 30-day evaluation, both training managers were quite impressed with Frank's skill in welding. Due to Frank's exceptional skill, he was progressively given more variety of tasks. Frank continued earning passing scores on evaluations. Anyone who welds knows that there are some fumes that can be bothersome, which generally comes from the territory. Frank requested DRS to secure a special respirator so he could work longer and continue performing at his very best, which we were able to provide for him. Both training managers remain supportive in mentoring Frank at work, achieving the DRS VR team's mission, and receptive to collaboration with workforce partners. Frank's case was successfully closed June 17th, 2022, and he is still currently employed with Chicago Metal. Even though Frank's OJT was not an apprenticeship, it effectively was very similar. While Frank already had his credentials, he faced additional barriers, often experienced by people with disabilities, and the OJT at Chicago Metal created the welcoming training environment to cultivate success in the practice of welding. To Frank, his experience at Chicago Metal was a rite of passage, his emergence into a career in the trades, and a vehicle for his professional development. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Those are great stories. I love a couple of things I really like. One was that one person was 23 and the other person was in their 50s. So I think that's really important. This idea that people with disabilities, that happens all through their life, and that we need to be thinking about people at very different stages in their career. And I also thought it was interesting how little was needed by way of accommodation. A respirator and a little bit of extra computer training that that was all it took to kind of get some, to help these people over the barrier. So I think that's great. Those are two great stories. Thanks, Michelle.
Hey, David, and I think those are two great stories also, that as we engage with these employers to, it gives our committee members an opportunity to maybe invite employers to participate more frequently in our work groups, right? To hear from those training managers, because it sounds like they are very supportive of the program and are using, the tools OJT that really, can really drive system integration. I mean, that both stories were fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. I think proof for, like you say, proof for the employers as well. Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Right. And it's always good to hear it straight from the employer's horse's mouth.
That's right. And I think that relates to some of the things we're gonna talk about here for our webinar series. Always think it's important to review kind of for everybody our charges and priorities. And our key charge is to really focus on barriers that are getting in the way of people with disabilities finding employment, with a focus on successful strategies and recommendations for how to get over those barriers. So some of the things that Michelle talked about today about additional computer training or help with respirator, those are the kinds of things that can really help people be successful. And our focus is on service integration. So looking for examples where different organizations from around the state and employers have worked together to make things successful. Career pathways. So certainly the manufacturing pathway, the welding pathway, there's a shortage of jobs there. And so that's a great example of someone at 23 who's going to get on a career pathway that has the potential to offer employment for them for the rest of their working career. And last, looking at ways to help with continuous improvement and making sure that people know about successes around the state so that they can learn from them and hopefully implement them in their areas. So great. When we got together in January, our focus then was really starting to think about what we wanted to do for our webinars this spring. We ran a webinar last fall, and I think it was very successful, but it was focused primarily on people within the workforce system. And we wanted to try to run some webinars more focused on the employer community. Ultimately decided on a 3-part series of three webinars. The first focused on corporate culture, the second on accommodations and universal design, and the last one on individualized support. And so our goal here today, and the last thing and today we'll talk a lot more about those 3 webinars. That's to be most of what we're going to do today. And then we also talked about having the June Career Pathways meeting in Southern Illinois focused on disability. And it does look like that is likely to happen in June in Collinsville, I believe. So Lee, we'll talk to you about some of the things we can do. You and I have had some conversations about that already, and we can have further conversations about what we might be able to do there. Great. We do have dates set for the 3 webinars. You can see them here. April 19th is the first one, then May 17th and July 25th, so about every month or so. What we'd like to do today is to split up into smaller groups of 3 or 4 people and start to look at potential speakers and potential topics or questions for the different panels. What we had planned to do, this is the same model we used last fall, is where each presenter, we would probably have like 3 presenters and a facilitator. Each presenter would get 5 or 10 minutes to talk a little bit about their perspective, any successes or challenges and barriers that they've seen in those particular areas. And then, so that's be 3 or 4 slides, not a long presentation. And then we would have a Q&A first facilitated by a facilitator, and then opening up to questions from the audience at the end. The total meetings are scheduled for 90 minutes. I believe that's right. And then, but we finished a little over 60 minutes last time, which is probably what we should be thinking about here. So we're going to break out into breakout rooms.
Hey,
Oh,
hey, Dave,
go, Craig.
this
Yeah,
is
sure.
Craig.
Sure.
Just, I'm looking at who's on screen and
Mhm.
knowing that you, Molly, and Sarah are facilitators in each of those. And then we've got like 3 other people on.
No, like
Is it-
there are like 13 people overall,
Oh,
including
okay,
the
okay,
3 of us.
perfect.
So we should have another.
Maybe that's just, okay, perfect, sorry.
So we should be able to
I
add
didn't
another
scroll
3
down.
people or so
Good,
into the
good, good,
groups.
good.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that we can have
It's not
good,
not
productive
talking to
conversation.
ourselves.
Exactly.
So I put in the chat, if anyone, I'm assigning the breakout rooms manually right now. Does anyone have a particularly strong preference toward one of these? If you have a specific expertise in one of these areas, I may want to make sure to get you in that breakout room. So, you know, if you want to raise your hand or put in the chat really quickly, if you have a strong preference, otherwise I'll just manually assign. So did anyone want to hop in with a strong preference?
And then David, if again, just reminding, if we can try to, when we think about these panels, like we've done before, the 3-legged stool of it, employer, right? We really want to get people from each group, the employer, the workforce system, yada, 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 as
Awesome.
part of these.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's most valuable if you can have some different perspectives on there where people hear different
Absolutely.
ways of looking at it.
Okay, great. I'm going to start assigning people. It'll just take 1 minute or so, and then you'll be
And
instructed into those rooms.
and then at the end, you'll bring us all back together. So
Yep, in 20
we're all
minutes.
going to come back together at the end, and we're going to discuss the just review what everybody came up with.
Perfect. Okay. So I am going to start by opening these up right here, and then you will get the option to join one. So just go ahead and join.
Hello.
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 Hey, Lee. How are you?
Like you and I don't talk enough already.
I know you're just like I'm like a penny. Or no, my grandpa would say I'm like an old penny that just keeps rolling on in.
Yeah, well, you got the old part right.
Yeah.
Well, I like
Hello,
my.
Donna. Good to see you
Hi.
too.
Good to see you.
Okay. Well, good. I think everyone knows each other then. We're all
Correct.
caught up on
And hi,
introductions.
Sarah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Wow. And I've worked with LaDonna and Lee before too. And Mitch, are you from upstate? Are you from downstate?
So I'm from Bourbonnais, so kind of central, but the Chicagoland area, and I live in Chicago now. So
Okay. So you're northern to us now.
yeah,
That's downstaters. Okay. Well,
yeah.
okay. So our breakout room that we're going to focus on is individualized support. So like David said, we're going to brainstorm speakers, potential questions, and then like a 3-sentence description for this webinar. So do you all have do you want to start at speakers or do you want to start at description? What would be helpful?
I think starting at description.
Okay. And by the way, I'm the worst speller. I'm like, you know, okay.
That's why autocorrect's there, right, Sarah?
I know. I've never
Yeah.
learned how to spell because I've always had a computer doing it for me. So just so you know, that'll happen. All right. So what do we think this session should be about? What would be the description that you all would think would be helpful?
How workforce development professionals can provide individualized supports for individuals with barriers.
Is this individualized support? There's another one too. I want to make sure that we know. So the other two are universal design and corporate culture. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's support for employees.
Yeah, for individuals with barriers. Yep, it showed up.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be red. It'll be like Christmas in here by the time I'm done typing. So, okay. This webinar will focus on
That's
how
kind of what LaDonna and I do, right?
Yep.
okay. What else? Maybe like 1 or 2 more sentences.
find out what services are provided.
And how to access them, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's okay. If we, I think we'll maybe get to more of a meaty statement after we get through the other portions. Do you all know speakers who do this or who could do this?
So I don't know that they're a perfect fit for this, but one of my friends and former coworkers who used to work at the University of Illinois system is now a senior policy aide on the U.S. Senate Disability Committee. So I don't know if this is the perfect fit for them, but that could be something to have somebody talking about the policy side and like what they're thinking at that level. I think she might be interested in something like this.
And what's their name, Mitch?
Yeah, it's her name is Grace Hart, and it's Hart.
And which?
It's the U.S. Senate Disability Committee.
Okay. Who else? I feel like, did Pat talk about this at our last meeting about individualized support, or was he more talking about corporate culture? Do we remember? Lee, this is your first meeting. I should not be like you. Can you remember?
I thought it was corporate culture, but I could be really wrong.
I can't remember either. I would be interested in like LaDonna, do you work with employers? And I'm sure Lee, you do too, that might have to provide individualized support, maybe talking about their journey through this all.
I mean, we get funded by DRS to like provide job coaches that go to the job with people and help them to do whatever, even fill out their paperwork, their hiring paperwork, to setting in the orientation with them, to
Do you
going
guys
to
do
the
that through
job
Challenge
with them.
Unlimited?
I'm sorry.
Do you do that through Challenge Unlimited?
No, we're the Evaluation and Developmental Center in Carbondale.
Okay, we
Yes,
use
I
Challenge
do.
Unlimited through DRS for pretty much any job coaching, and Challenge is wonderful. They'd be a good speaker.
Exactly. So yeah, when I can't think of her name right now, but Challenge Unlimited is, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, Miss Hammond is the CEO.
What's their name, Lee?
I can look it up real quick. Hold on a second.
Okay. Because I think that would be cool, a job coach telling like what their side of it is, and then if we could maybe team it with an employer that's like, we always talk about the three-legged stool of support.
So quick question, who do we expect to be like the audience that'll be attending the webinar? Like who is it going to get marketed to?
So typically these webinars are marketed to the workforce system.
Okay.
So people who are kind of already in the water of this,
Mhm.
but we're trying really hard to break it out of that because, it's like a little bit preaching to the choir, like how can
Yeah.
we push it out more to employers? I think in our other work groups, returning citizens and youth, we're really trying to move it beyond the people who are already talking about it into people who could actually use it for their organization or things like that. So I know in the returning citizens, they're going to do a webinar and they have to share it with one employer that they know.
Mhm.
So kind of like
I wonder, and this is a question for just like how we do the marketing, but inviting some of like the industry associations is maybe one of these too. And that's again a little off topic, but like I'm thinking like Illinois Manufacturers Association or Associated Equipment Distributors, or just a lot of different groups that are based here. Could be interesting.
yeah, I'm sure there'd be many people who would love that idea. And I think it's a great idea too.
And those groups also, like, if, if they really understand it, like the leadership really understands, like Sarah Hartwick, they have like newsletters and other communication channels that they can help share and be like kind of a mouthpiece for some of the opportunities, especially because they're facing major employment gaps and skills gaps right now. So, just again, another way for them to help expose more people in the industry to these
Do you
ops.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you have
Yeah,
any of those contacts? Like, do you know
yeah.
those people?
Yeah,
Maybe
I know Lee and I both know Sarah, I think, pretty well. So I'd be happy to, once we kind of have this flushed out and have an idea of like what it might look like, I'm sure we can share it with her. And like they always are willing to share things with their employer partners. So I'm sure that either they could be joining or they might even just push the webinar to their members as an opportunity to learn about this.
definitely. And that's through IMA.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, IMA is great. But I imagine that maybe even like some of the chambers of commerce might be interested too. Again, pushing it out to their memberships, especially if these are opportunities again for their members to potentially engage some people in a workforce that they haven't considered before. So
Yeah.
again, helping them kind of identify those opportunities to help them fill their skills gaps.
I wonder too, I know often the LWIB and LWIA kind of have a disconnect, like the operationalizing of the ideas. If we could figure out how to tap into the LWIB, like the board in the conversation, I think they often are more connected to employers than the people running the AJC. That's an anecdotal observation.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's great. And Mitch, I'm going to make a note for Molly to reach out to you as we kind of try to propel these webinars more towards the marketing side.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an employer that comes to mind that would be a good speaker, or would there be another like LaDonna or Lee, like how you all work with, people in this population?
So we had a roundtable in May of this last year. So we had Ronnie Patrick down from Voc Rehab.
Mhm.
We had John Michelle from Social Kitchen, who has the food truck apprenticeships that we have here. He's a really good speaker. He's a retired one-star general. He's very articulate, well educated.
What was his name,
It's
Lee?
John Michelle, Michel. It's with Social Kitchen. And then we had Benny Parr. Benny Parr runs Benny's Pizza in downtown Belleville. We do a lot of Bridges students from the West, where they bring their job coach and they come out and they're individuals with different abilities, and he takes them that first year and transitions them on to full-time employment with him.
I really like the bridges aspect of that too, because that's where you kind of get in the ICCB folks, or how to kind of loop the whole system in.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah,
Hmm?
I think what I'd like to see is the state has a whole network of providers that can provide these individualized supports. And I think that needs to get out there, like who that network is, because I think there's probably a lot of employers out there that if they would have known, they could have reached out to EDC or Challenge Unlimited or, anybody to get that, maybe could have saved some jobs. And I think that, DRS needs to supply that and show that there's a whole network around the state that are already in place.
I love that. So are most of those like support networks through DRS then, LaDonna? Or are they
Yes.
okay? And then
DRS is the people that fund that.
Okay.
I don't know. There might be other funders for it.
So kind of like
He has just started doing like supported employment, but I don't know how much or what they're funding. So.
And I'm sorry, I interrupted you when you said that last place.
DD. Has started doing supported employment But I don't know, like I say, what or how much they're funding.
And what is division of, or department of?
Division of Developmental Disabilities.
And that's through DHS too.
IDHS, yeah.
I like that, kind of like who you can reach out to as an employer, how you can reach out to them.
I think providing that information and getting that out is. I think.
LaDonna, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The DD is that the DD council that you're referring to?
No, the
Oh, okay.
Department of Developmental Disability.
Got it. Okay, sorry.
No.
Well,
And I'll have Ronnie Patrick here March 1st for a visit on some of our employers if you want me to ask specific questions.
yeah, I really like that idea too, because I think that's like the hardest thing about getting into the system is like you don't know who to ask. There's like 50 different departments, different, partners. Everyone has a different scope. Okay.
Lee, I think you guys have done some really incredible work that I've seen, and I don't know, there might be other workforce boards that do it, but I know the work you do. Even just describing like the steps that you've taken as a workforce board to be proactive on this and like to set everything up. Like, I'd be really interested to hear more about like how long it's taken, what you've done, what you've done very intentionally to get these relationships built, to offer the apprenticeship programs and everything else that you guys have done. So that might be something interesting to kind of talk about too, especially if the audience is really those other LWIAs and other workforce system providers.
Yeah, it's all relationships.
Yeah.
And it does take time to develop, but I tell everybody you have to be willing to just give.
Yeah.
No no's, give, even if you don't think it's something you should be doing. Just.
Yeah.
The other group that I thought was interesting was even from just the stories earlier. I think hearing from Chicago Metal, just like it sounds like they totally had a total mind shift on the capabilities of that employee that they hired. I forget what his name was, John D or something like that.
Mhm.
But having an employer talk about that and like how they came in thinking one thing and how that person just totally changed their perspective on what it meant to have a disability and what that means for their work ethic and ability to perform on the job. I think that would be awesome to hear.
I also think it would be neat to hear from like an employer, which does get kind of tricky. But an employer who've gone through this, like as the kind of staple to the conversation, like the success story to ground it, and then like how they reached out and what else DRS has. So we kind of go through like, this is why it's important, this is how we did it, and then go through, and you can do it too. This is all the things that DRS has to offer, and you can, and then how you get your LWIB involved, or so it's more of a how-to than just look at these people who already have 10-year relationships and like super happy for them. How am I going to do that too?
Like
And
the
it's not
roadmap.
just individuals with differing abilities. Like in our case, we just got a grant that we're using to pay off fines for individuals to go into CDL programs.
Mhm.
And so that was a justice involved grant that we got. And so that's individualized support, paying that fine off so that this individual can get into a program that gives a sustainable wage and just positively impacts the whole family.
Yeah. LaDonna, what are you thinking? You have your thinking face on, I'm gonna guess. Are you LaDonna, are you still like this idea?
Sure.
And Mitch and Lee, okay. And if we need somebody to do a report out from this group, is there any volunteers from you three? Or do you want me to do it? I can do it. That's fine too. Okay.
You have a fearless leader.
Okay. And it'll be like,
I'm
one of the
shocked.
So just thinking of like the order, like the actual schedule of how this would work, like how the webinar would play out. I do really like the idea that LaDonna had brought up about how you talk about the resources that are available in the system and making just identifying like if you are in this part of the state, how do you identify who those people are that are your collaborators to have an initial meeting? And even just, I'm thinking in terms of like what recommendations are, like the first step might be, you don't even need to start thinking about what this looks like in your organization. Start talking with that person and building that relationship with those providers. So I'm just thinking about like how you put together the webinar agenda. I think that could be a really good place to start, and then just building off of there, like what the steps might be.
So kind of like a roadmap to creating.
Yeah, because I think the other thing is like you don't need the folks that are our audience to be the professionals here, right? Is that you have support network that's set, so lean into that, like have intention, but then leverage the resources available to you to, be able to create good programming.
So Mitch, some of the equipment that we bought, one of the local training colleges was one of the college that does some training for us, was we bought them some weighted vests and some glasses that impair their vision and some things to make them empathetic in the workplace to the people that they serve. It'd be great if Transfer could do a VR segment for employers and like high school students where they could experience disabilities.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down.
That is really good. I think also, as we look at the summit coming up and things like this, like that is also something that the leaders need to understand. Because they're the ones with their hands right on different opportunities or funding opportunities, or, that's very interesting. So, we're going back.
Oh, I sent you the lady's name and email.
Oh,
Contact
perfect.
information. Yeah,
Thank
Charlotte
you.
Hammond.
All right, see you back in the main group.
Wow. Well, hello again.
Oh, hey. Did y'all have a nice long weekend? Did you all have Monday off? Yesterday off?
Yep. Took Friday off too.
Yeah, nice.
That's why I didn't respond to your emails tomorrow.
Hey, it's okay. I was flying home. I was visiting one of my best friends in LA, so that's when I was sending all those emails, Lee.
You poor thing, spending your time in California. It must have
Yeah,
been
it wasn't warm
weather.
at all. It was
Well,
like
Sometimes I'm like, I wish Mitch
no
would.
sun.
That's terrible. Gross. I hate it when it's too sunny and the weather's too nice.
Yeah,
I hate
awful.
that. Yeah.
I'm sorry I had to put up with that.
Yeah.
Somebody had to do it though.
Yeah, somebody did.
Great.
Hello,
Yeah.
I'm back.
Got everybody back? Awesome. So good. So now let's see, what time is it? We got about 20 minutes. So like 5 minutes or so from each group, just sort of speakers you've identified as candidates, questions that you think might be relevant, and then a overall description of what you're thinking about for the breakout or for the webinar. So Molly and your team, you guys want to go first?
Sure, and I'll share our slide. And I started asking this question to my group. Group, who would like to share?
So I guess
okay, I'll say specifically who is in our group, but you go for it, Craig.
Okay, so we talked about what employers we'd like to have talk and breaking them into different groups. From our prior conversations, we actually had it easy because we already had some ideas generated between small, medium, and large employers, so we could get each perspective, right? Because we know that particularly with corporate culture, what it takes to change corporate culture in each of those different environments is different. So you can see we figured for a small employer, we could tap our very own Pat Maher. For medium, we thought we could approach either a Bazaar or a Chicago Lighthouse. And then for large, because we know we've done some stuff with distribution, we thought maybe an Aurora Health, which Michelle has a relationship with, or University of Chicago because there's been some turnover at Aurora Health, and the people that we used to partner with may not be in place today, and or Suncast, which is in kind of more that manufacturing industrial, which is always an interesting combination, right? So then we started talk about questions that we would pose to this panel. And we started talking about, what are some of the accommodations or low hanging fruit from a cultural standpoint, from an organizational standpoint that people were able to make. That way, any employers attending can walk away from the webinar with a tool in hand, with ideas, right, that they could implement without a lot of effort, but also understanding that changing culture can be a slow process. So what was the largest challenge they had to, each organization had to overcome relative to their size in creating an inclusive culture for individuals with disabilities, right? And how did they utilize education to help in changing that culture? Who did they educate? What type of education did they do? We've got to kind of work on that question, but it got to, how did they utilize training and education within that to help augment their culture? And then we got into, how did they make the organization feel comfortable talking about disability and when it's appropriate, because we know that it borders on employment law and discrimination of, you can't ask certain things at different stages, but how did you help supervisors and managers feel comfortable, and how did you have that conversation with candidates? And I think that's going to tie back to the training, right? And then, basically, what was the catalyst for you starting the journey to be inclusive, specifically with disabilities to begin with, and what have been the major benefits that you found since? Because obviously, if we're targeting employers, talking ROI is always a good thing for business leaders to hear about. As far as the description, yeah, we didn't get there. So.
That's great, Craig. Thank you. And one of the things that I also find interesting or challenging when I talk to employers about this is what to do, kind of what to do first. Like the sort of like, okay, there's all this stuff to do. Like, how do I start, and how much do I have to do before I can start hiring people? And because everything sounds like a good idea, but
in some of that we admitted in our group, David, that as we see the questions that come out in others, that maybe some of our stuff with what accommodations and when might go to the individualized support group, and maybe some of the questions in your guys group may work with the culture.
Yeah,
presentation. So
would that be cool if they all kind of fit together? That'd be awesome. Great. Does anybody else have any thoughts or feedback for Molly, Craig, and the rest of that team? Great, thanks. We'll turn to the next thing. We didn't do a slide, so I took notes, so I'll just recap that. We really started, I think, with the description, which is sort of like, what is it that we want to talk about here? And universal design or human-centered design, which I guess is probably the term we'll want to use. I think that's is not necessarily familiar to everybody. That we wanted to, we saw kind of a cascade, which is like, first we would introduce kind of the concept behind human-centered design. What does it mean? How does it manifest itself? Some examples of it, not beyond conceptual, but sort of practical kind of levels of that. Then specifically into assistive technologies, and DRS has a whole group on assistive technologies, and sort of getting now into specific kinds of technologies that could be applied, how you go about getting referred to get these services. You know, if someone comes into a one-stop, where do they get sent? And then how it's worked realistically in an employer. So kind of going from the concept to specific kinds of tools and techniques to a real example of how it worked. And we have started, we have identified sort of an initial list of speakers to kind of map up against that. So Amy was willing to serve as our human-centered design expert. Having done quite a bit of work in this, both overall as well as in education. So she should be able to bring a lot of thoughts on that. Then Lori's going to help us find somebody from the assistive technology unit at DRS, or potentially their partners at University of Chicago who they work with, but someone who can talk about sort of overall different categories of things and how they're delivered and so forth. And then we identified a handful of partners that look promising. One is Project Search. So one of the companies working with Project Search, which are typically largish employers that will hire, they have like a year-long apprenticeship program, and they'll end up hiring 10 or putting 10 or 15 people through that. A lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but still accommodations and different things they have to do for different individuals. So we wanted to make sure we got a employer that had hired ideally more than one person, so that they could have actually kind of a broader perspective and talk about a few more situations rather than just someone who had hired one. That also suggested potentially Walgreens, again, where they've hired quite a number of people. Then depending on whether you guys, whether Pat joins that first one on corporate culture, which I know he's passionate about, we thought SBR might also be interesting because it's a different kind of, it's a business services job, which again is a little different from some of the ones we talk about. Autonomy work, so that would be me talking about some of what we've done. Happy to do that. And then potentially Misericordia. And we sort of assigned people to go, Lori and I are going to go kind of reach out for a couple of people and see if we can, see who we can come up with on the employer side. And we didn't really get too far into questions. Anybody have any feedback, comments, ideas for us?
I really like the Walgreens, right? Because when you think about depending on the nature of the disability, anytime you get into that industrial or distribution, there's additional barriers with fork truck and industrial environment and with safety that have to be overcome. So I love to hear those type of stories. And I think those are meaningful and connect with a lot of different employers that we try to target, especially as we think about demand occupations and where the shortage is. So I would challenge the Walgreens, or if there's anybody in the manufacturing or industrial. I'm not saying that it's easy to do it in a business service environment, right? It's just some of the barriers are a little bit lower.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you don't use Suncast, that is a manufacturing environment where they have built that out. So
that'd be awesome.
Positive. If you don't, again, if that doesn't fit into yours up front.
I think rock, paper, scissors is a great way to go to decide.
Almost always. Great. Any other feedback for that team? Awesome. Let's turn to the last one. Sarah?
For my screen. So I had Lee, LaDonna, and Mitch in my breakout room, or in our breakout room. So not chatty at all. No, it was and we started like David's group with the description. I'm going to make this a little bigger. So we think that this webinar would be great to focus on support for how workforce development professionals could provide individual support for individuals with barriers, focusing on what services could be provided and how to access those services. And then as we talked, we kind of thought like maybe creating a roadmap to creating those initiatives in your area. So then we moved on to, I think LaDonna had this point of who can you reach out to? And like how you can reach out to them, and then what services do they have? And then how can an LWeb actually get those initiatives off the ground? So the ideas that we had for when we brainstormed speakers were a lot of DRS representatives, including like a job coach, Challenge Unlimited was mentioned, Ronnie Patrick as maybe speaking to what IDHS and DRS have. And then we kind of circled around this idea of the network of providers, the organizations who can supply support to employers or organizations. So the DRS support network, the Department of Development Disability, and then we talked about different organizations that may use DRS for their supportive services. So Social Kitchen, Benny Parr, they use a Bridges program, in Chicago Metal. And yeah, just who can someone reach out to, how and what services do they have? And then we talked about how we could maybe market it to industry reps and the leadership people in this ecosystem, like the Illinois Manufacturing Association or Chambers of Commerce, to kind of help connect those ideas to people in local areas, to kind of spread these ideas and initiatives. So does anybody have any questions? And Lee, LaDonna, and Mitch, feel free to chime in if you would like.
Just a note, I think for all of them is just, as we think about marketing the webinars and who we market to and how we, are intentional about who the audience might be, just thinking through those strategies and how we do outreach to maybe spread the word about the webinars. And I think that applies to every one of the webinars, and just being intentional about who we do marketing to.
And I was going to say, like, maybe under the session description, the webinar will focus not just on how workforce development professionals, but employers or, anybody can provide the individual supports.
It would be interesting, as you talk about this also, would be to think about if someone could talk a little bit about natural supports and how companies can build kind of supports into the way they manage and operate, whether it's team, pairing people up together, or different kinds of things that people can do to offer natural supports without them necessarily needing to be outside people, so it could be just more efficient.
And I think that would tie back, David, to your point, back to culture, to tie all three pieces together, that as you go along the journey, it becomes part of your natural culture to set up your processes to have a human-based centered design and think about, pairing people up isn't just relevant for people that may have different abilities, but it's good for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So, and going on what LaDonna said, I would, again, for all these, I thought when we started out, we said the target is employers, right? Because the last one was workforce, is just flipping the switch on that of saying, as an employer, how do you partner with, or who can you partner with your local WIB and other state agencies and support systems, kind of spinning, LaDonna, what you said, but making it employer focused, right? Which we can do afterwards. That's not that difficult, just flipping that, but I like it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, everybody. This was a really good input. I really like the way the breakout sessions work to facilitate conversation on this. So that was a good idea, Molly. Thanks for getting that set up. So we have just a few minutes left. So to go back to the agenda or to deck, but what we'll do here is is sort of take these. The first one is scheduled for April 17th. So we'll be working on getting scheduled in our next meeting in March. We should have a pretty well shaped up. For the next Career Pathways quarterly meeting is going to be sort of disability focused. We've been looking, as I mentioned earlier, for doing that in Southern Illinois in mid-June. So we'll need to, the ideal thing that we've done in the past has been a 2-hour meeting with the larger group. And then for people who are able, that would be hybrid, and then an in-person visit or tour to a local facility that is related to it. So we'll be talking to Lee and some of the other folks around there to see if we can identify a couple of locations that would make sense for us to go to.
And David, just while you're talking quarterlies, just start in general. Never mind. She's already got it covered. You're awesome.
Yep. Right. So, and that's the June meeting I just talked about. We have a meeting coming up in March, on March 17th. So I look forward to seeing everybody there. I'll certainly be there in person and hope that I get to see a lot of you there as well.
Sorry, I'm going back to the slide. Somehow my computer was just advancing without my knowledge.
And David, I know Molly and I have spoke of this, and Lee, just so you know, we're going to be in Collinsville at the Gateway Center for the June meeting. So if you need space there for the meeting itself, just let us know. Molly and I work, I mean, I talked to her already this morning. Not only do I get to see her little lovely face during the meeting, but I've already spoken with her. So if we, if you want to use that, but then Lee, that'll give you idea of what's close to that area. Or if you want to have the meeting at a completely separate location, that's okay as well.
Okay.
And team, with some other system integration stuff we're doing with educating on returning citizens series. The team has created, our support system has created some really good tools for helping market that out on LinkedIn and getting employers to sign up. And Molly's done, even for our CPTP meetings, some registrations and links to help attract populations to attend the meeting. So
Yeah, go ahead and check your emails, because on Thursday, I believe, I sent out the information for this quarterly meeting and the registration that you're talking about, Craig. So it should be on all of your emails, but I'll also include it with the notes for this, the registration link, so you'll see it twice.
That sounds awesome. Thanks, Molly. And great. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. I feel like we made a lot of progress on the webinar, so I appreciate everybody digging in on that. I feel really good about where we are in those. So have a great week. We'll see you hopefully in March.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.